where we can speak to international lawyer Nathan Park, who writes extensively about Asian affairs in a number of publications. Thank you so much for joining us. The June 12th Singapore summit, what's your understanding? Is it on or is it off?
It certainly looks like it'll be on. Everybody is preparing as if it'll be on. Donald Trump's letter, one might say that if Donald Trump seriously meant to cancel the June 12th summit, he would have tweeted it rather than send a letter.
Absolutely, and we're getting pretty promising sounding noises out of New York, where those talks between Mike Pompeo and the visiting North Korean envoy are into their second day. Seems like things are going rather well. Mike Pompeo calling this substantive discussions, and certainly what they're saying all sounds very promising. Are they ironing out the details, do you think, for that summit?
Right, I think so. And everybody knows that the million-dollar question is what type of form this denuclearization will take place. Will this be the immediate CVID denuclearization that the United States like to talk about, the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization, or is it going to be a phased, step-by-step approach? And bridging that gap will be crucial towards making this a successful summit, and it seems like the talks are progressing rather well.
In terms of giving up their nuclear weapons, I mean, how likely do you think North Korea is to do that on a unilateral, total basis? Because aren't they the country's best friend in terms of deterring would-be hostile forces?
Right, and virtually every expert agrees that this immediate, complete denuclearization will be out of the reach, and only hope that this could even be considered is if the United States can give a reciprocal security guarantees. So CVIG for CVID, complete, verifiable, irreversible guarantee from the United States. And there were already some chatter about whether or not the United States might consider entering into a non-aggression pact with North Korea and other guarantees of that sort.
Okay, well, we've been looking at some pictures there of the latest diplomatic excitement in Pyongyang. The Russian foreign minister who's been joining in this diplomatic dance with North Korea. What do you make of that?
I think Russians are understanding that we are approaching a very important moment where North Korea, as unlikely as it sounds today, it may be the case that if these talks progress well, North Korea may become friend of the United States. I wouldn't go so far as to say ally, but it could be a friendly state to the United States, much as former communist countries like Vietnam is currently. So when Russia senses that there's this moment where a very significant geopolitical shift may happen in East Asia, they definitely want to have a seat on the table and see if they can sort of leverage their own influence there.
But that is, of course, the first time that a senior Russian official has ever even met Kim Jong-un. His father and grandfather, of course, did meet Russian officials, but they haven't done anything up until this point. And I'm just wondering whether the North Koreans perhaps think they're a bit late to the table and perhaps they're going to give priority automatically to the United States for taking this initiative.
Guessing what North Korea's intentions are is always a very hazardous game. So it's a tough thing to say. But you are absolutely correct that Russia just has not been a very active player when it comes to the Korean Peninsula. But to be fair, even Xi Jinping himself did not meet Kim Jong-un in person until just a couple of years ago. And China is the bedrock of North Korea's security. So when it comes to the Kim Jong-un regime, they really just play an isolationist game, even to its nominal allies.
Yeah, you mentioned China, and when President Donald Trump sent that letter to the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un saying that the 12th of June summit in Singapore is off, he seemed to suggest that China was trying to muddy the waters. He said that. It wasn't exactly in the letter, but he did say that verbally on the record. Why do you think China, well, first of all, why do you think he thinks that China is trying to muddy the waters?
There were some media reports coming out of Japan and South Korea saying that when Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un met in Dalian recently, Dalian, China, Xi Jinping had told Kim Jong-un that United States cannot be trusted. Whatever security guarantees that United States would offer would be false. And Kim Jong-un was sort of leaning towards listening to that, and that was sort of the source of tension there. Now, I think China, even more so than Russia, understands that they are facing down this very historical moment where it is entirely possible for the United States to turn North Korea in some way from being China's ally into a friend of the United States, and that is something that China certainly does not want. Now, China does not want a nuclear North Korea either, because China feels that the nuclear weapon that North Korea has can be turned against them in a bad situation. So China will help. China will do enough to denuclearize North Korea, perhaps, but not to an extent that North Korea will walk straight towards the American arms, and this will be a very delicate dance.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that point with you in just a second, but I just want to update you and our viewers. We're just getting word actually from the State Department that in fact the talks between Mike Pompeo and the North Korean official appear to have gone so well that they've actually finished early. That's what the State Department is saying. So much progress has been made. The talks have actually finished early. So it looks like that summit is definitely back on. Any thoughts, Nathan?
I think it's good news. I think it's good news that parties are talking. There were very legitimate concerns about how the goals of the United States and the goals of North Korea were so far apart that even a discussion would not be possible. So it's a positive thing that there is going to be a talk. I hope there is, and that the parties are at least in a position to discuss and negotiate.
Yeah, so you're welcoming the fact that there is this dialogue happening, because some people think President Donald Trump is perhaps getting a little bit ahead of himself in agreeing to shake the hand of a man who many would say is a pariah state leader. I mean, he's very much part of the axis of evil, as the United States would have once termed it. And some people saying, Donald Trump really shouldn't be meeting him at all. What do you say to those people?
I'd say those concerns are very legitimate. It is not. When I favor talks, it is because I like Kim Jong-un in any way. He's a brutal dictator, and if there is justice in the world, he would get what's coming from him. At any rate, though, we are facing down a possibility of a nuclear war. We are facing down a possibility of a nuclear missile heading towards the United States. And as Winston Churchill said, jaw is always better than war.
Yeah, and just lastly, to pick you up on what you were saying earlier about China, as I promised I would, just to summarize our discussion, I mean, do you get the impression that the fact that North Korea has been there, a menace in the region, a threat to regional stability, has that served to anybody's advantage? Has that played to anyone's advantage, do you think, in the region? Is there something that China would like to see continue as opposed to a reunification of the two Koreas and peace and harmony on the Korean peninsula?
So China is in this very delicate situation where they do not want a belligerent and unstable North Korea. They cannot risk North Korea collapsing and have a million refugees crossing over to the Chinese border. The Chinese also very much fear something accidental. It could very well be the case that North Koreans mishandle the nuclear materials and have a Chernobyl-style accident where the fallout would easily reach China. So China certainly does not want that. On the other hand, China is probably not in favor of a reunification that will inevitably turn the whole of Korean Peninsula more towards the United States. So they are in this very delicate situation where they are willing to help just enough to denuclearize North Korea, but not quite enough to destabilize the regime.
Okay, well, it's been really interesting talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing those insights with us. Nathan Park in Washington, thank you very much indeed. That's it for this half hour